And boss, you can start whenever you want to. We are live.
Okay, thank you. We'll wait till 7.
I'm making them copies of these sheets.
I really would. It's, you have trouble sleeping. I'm reading. I don't sleep, but I will do it. It's just so good to remember that. This is one of the things. Yeah, I figured that's really must make substantive changes. Especially with the discussion is. How's your trip overseas? You got to play golf and stuff. No, it's business of a few person first. Mostly learn. Appreciate that. Where I find is up in Scotland, it's the Hades and Colin. Over on the Kintyre Peninsula. They can. Pretty. Say, it's not time of year to read it.
Yeah, if somebody adds up.
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, it's true.
We saw it in the TV show.
Next door. Yeah. Okay, you can. I got people that's better. Okay. Yeah, you do your city level. Yeah. There, some bullshit.
Good evening, everyone. It's 7 p.m., so we'll go ahead and call the meeting, City Council regular meeting to order. Today's date is February 21st, 2023. For those of you who are present who would like to speak this evening during the comments from citizens section of the agenda, there's a sign-up sheet that a number of you have signed. If you intend to speak and haven't signed up, if you'll let me know, I'll add your name to the list. Okay. First order of business is approval of the minutes of 4 meetings. January 1st, 2023, which was the installation of the swearing in of the council and the mayor. Regular meeting of January 9, 2023. Special meeting of January 12, 2023. And special meeting of January 25, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as distributed?
So move.
Second. Any comments, corrections, additions? If not, the minutes will stand approved. John's raised a good point. We should vote on that. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item of business is comments from citizens. So those of you who've signed up, if you will, when you're ready to speak, come up when I call your name, come up to the lectern and be sure to speak into the microphone, because that's how we create our record, and also how people who are not present will, that are participating by WebEx, will be able to hear you. So I'm going to call first on John Clark. if you'd step up, John. John's the chair of the Code Enforcement Board. Sorry. Oh, yeah. John, Carter just reminded me, comments are limited to 3 minutes. When you've got about 10 seconds left, John's going to ring a little bell, let you know you need to wrap up. So when you hear the bell, you'll need to wrap up.
Okay.
John?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. John Clark. I live at 6823 Wyndham Parkway in Sutherland. And as Doug mentioned, I'm current chairman of the Code Enforcement Board. Randy Swan was the prior chairman. She had to resign for personal reasons related to health issues. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the first reading passage of Ordinance 622. I think that it provides some clarity we do not have now in the Code of Ordinances regarding natural landscapes. And I think it provides some good parameters that Metro put into their Code of Ordinances. And we're using basically the same language here. And I would remind everyone that first reading is not passage, requires a second reading with passage. So passage tonight could be tweaked possibly for a second reading, maybe after some comments from citizens tonight. As I said, I think that it provides some clarity where we have ambiguity now in the Code of Ordinances as it relates to the issue of nuisances, weeds, and natural landscapes. So I would urge passage of the first reading for Ordinance 622.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Jason Hall and Joshua Gadney have signed up, but you're here to deal with the Gustavos issue. Okay, so you don't need to make your comments now, but appreciate you signing up. Greg Hulsman.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Greg Hulsman, 7210 Hunters Run Drive in Sutherland. And I'd like to pass these around. If I could start with you, Frank, and if you could take one and pass it around. So I know you have a very full agenda. I'll be brief. Basically, I'm here tonight to ask the city leadership to consider celebrating our 50th anniversary, which will be in 2024. I believe the city was born on April the 3rd, if I remember correctly, the day of the famous tornado in Louisville. But anyway, that's our 50th anniversary next year. And my idea is I have several suggestions here for you, the mayor, or if you form a group to look at. I didn't want to just say, hey, we need to do a party, but without suggesting some things. Most of the things on the list are low-cost items. There are things like newsletter articles that pertain to the great diversity of our city, as well as the great history, some of which Ms. Leonard has documented over the past years. So there are many things to celebrate, but it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but there are a few things on there that could cost some money too, depending upon what the city leadership wants to do. So basically, I'm just here tonight to say, would you please consider celebrating our 50th anniversary next year? And I think it might take a while to put that together. So I wanted to get to you early this year to do that. So that's basically it, unless anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Greg. We appreciate it. It's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
With everything that's going on, it would have been easy for us to fall behind on that. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
reminding us. Thank you,
Any suggestions? Thank you.
And next on the list is Jacqueline McGrill.
I just want to speak about the proposed modifications to the Code of Ordinances regarding the property maintenance. I think that the proposed revisions are a good idea. They are word for word exactly what Metro enacted last spring. I testified before the Metro Council on that ordinance, and was in close contact with the scientists who developed it. The only thing that I think is uncalled for in the ordinance is the issue of the requiring a 5-foot setback from property lines for a managed natural landscape. None of the people who wrote the ordinance for Metro were in favor of the 5-foot setback. That was insisted upon by some members of Metro Council. And of course, in the spirit of compromise, you have to do certain things. But it seems excessive. I think a 2-foot as one of the requirements is to have some kind of border or edging, and it states that a 2-foot mowed strip of lawn grass would be an appropriate edging for a managed natural landscape. So I think you should consider whether a 5-foot setback from property lines is necessary. That's the only thing that I would suggest about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. And Sandra Leonard.
Thank you. As you know, I've been on the city council. I had been for a very long time, but what you don't know is that I'm also a master gardener here in Jefferson County. And as recently as not quite 2 weeks ago, I took a class on pollinator gardens, attracting butterflies and bees. Okay, so I'm looking at this ordinance from 2 perspectives, and from both perspectives, I have major issues. First of all, the concept I'm 100% in support of. I think that natural gardens have a real place in society. At the workshop that I went to, we saw many pictures of natural gardens, one of them here in Prospect, and it was gorgeous. It was well maintained, because what people tend to think of with natural gardens is that they're unkempt. And that is not true. It does not have to be true. So when I look at this ordinance, first of all, the section that it's under is called weeds or grass. And the reason for that is because there are no ordinances that relate to what our environment should look like around our houses. And it's only in the nuisance ordinance that we talk about any of this. I would indicate that what we've written here is much more than weeds and grass, and deserves its own separate chapter instead of being put under weeds and grass where no one's going to find it. For example, in what we have deleted, there are some real components in there that would be helpful to maintain, because they really are nuisances. In what we're putting in, we're talking about weeds or plant growth in excess of 10 inches. I would maintain that well-organized gardens very often have things of more than 10 inches. Plant growth is not just little tidy things that we have. And the reason that it doesn't make any sense is rose bushes are more than 10 inches, but they're plant growth. I don't think that this section, the way it is totally applicable to a residential neighborhood. I think the components of what's trying to be achieved can be achieved, but not necessarily with these words, because even later on in that same sentence, we're talking about plant growth exceeding 10 inches. Trees are plant growth. They exceed 10 inches. Anyway, and then when I take a look at this also, and I'm looking at the managed natural landscape, there are some components of that are fantastic. I love them. But when we're talking about all of what we're doing, are we talking about just front yards? Are we talking about backyards? If we're talking about back and side yards, what's our component for enforcement? We've got a major problem with that. In addition to that, the bottom of this section 2 says, if any of this is in violation of one of our other ordinances, the other ordinance doesn't stand. Clearly, parts of this are in a violation of our sign ordinance. I think all of this can be accomplished, but I don't think the words on this paper are complete.
Thank you, Sandra. Next item on the agenda is my report. I'm going to try to speak briefly about 4 topics. the US 42 improvements, the investment committee, the request for proposal we had out for the landscape vendor for the city, and the City Hall cleanup day that we held. So everyone in the room, I think, is familiar. Most of us in the room are familiar with the US 42 Transportation Planning Study. In 2020, the city teamed with the Kentucky Department of Transportation to commission a transportation planning study, and that was completed this past summer. It's a very helpful document. QK4 was the consulting group to put this together in consultation with the city, the Department of Transportation, and many other stakeholders. The area studied and reported on in the planning study is from the Gene Snyder down to Rose Island Road. Recently, the Kentucky Department of Transportation has agreed to move forward with substantial improvements on US 42 from Hunting Creek to River Road. And that includes sidewalks on each side of US 42. There's a 5 to 7 year timeline for this to be accomplished, so it's not going to happen overnight. And the very good news is typically there would be a match from the city for this type of project. In this case, the Department of Transportation is going to fund 100% of the cost. So that's a very favorable development for us. And I want to mention Herb Schulhafer and his group and thank him and Greg Hulsman, who's present, and others who served on that. They did a really excellent job in putting that together and working with QK4 and getting us to this point. So the second thing that I want to mention is at our January 25 special meeting, the council approved an investment policy. And I've asked several people to serve on an investment committee. They include, and Don Grader, I'm going to list your name. I'm not sure if you and I have talked about this, but we have. Okay. Don will be.
Is there a Zoom meeting?
Okay. Don will be a member of the investment committee. He's had a distinguished career in financial services, including heading Hilliard Lyons Financial Planning Department, and more recently being a founding partner in Greater Financial Services. Councilmember Don Gibson has agreed to serve. He's a retired GE executive. He served a number of times on the city's budget committee. Dennis Riggs, now who lives in Fox Harbor, is the now retired CEO of the Louisville Community Foundation, is well qualified to do this, and he's agreed to serve. And then finally, Bill Brad, who also had a distinguished career in financial services, has agreed to serve. So that by ordinance, the city maintains approximately $2 million in reserves. So the focus of the investment committee would be to look at those funds and to see if we're managing them correctly and make recommendations on how we might invest those funds. The group will meet, develop an investment plan for the city's consideration, and we'll keep the council closely informed each step of the way on that. The third item that I want to mention is the request for proposals that the city put out for the landscape contract. We received 3 bids, and those were opened yesterday. We elected to accept a bid from Greenscapes. That's the company that currently does the landscape work here in the city of Prospect. We've got an excellent relationship with them, and we're pleased that they'll continue in that role. It is a 2-year contract, and then there's an ability to renew for up to an additional 3 years. Greenscapes also does the city's snow removal. That's a separate contract and is not part of the bid that we accepted and the contract that we entered into today. And finally, I'll mention that on February 10th, we had a cleanup day here at City Hall, and everybody in City Hall participated. We started off in the morning with donuts and worked on cleaning up our workspaces. Jeff and Tony worked upstairs in the police department, and basically we worked rid of a lot of files that there's no need to keep. that we're permitted to dispose of. Those are being shredded. Anything of any historical significance is being kept. And of course, anything that we're required to maintain, we're maintaining. But we got a surprising amount of paper into shredder boxes that was hauled off site and shredded. So we made some good progress on that buddy. We also had a pizza lunch that was a lot of fun. Louis Fowler, who's the president of Prospect Ocean Rotary, helped cheerlead for us and brought in the donuts and the pizza. So we had a very good day. So that concludes my report. If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Doug?
Yeah.
I have a question. The amount of the contract?
Is, you're talking about the landscape contract?
Yes.
$239,000.
Doesn't that require council approval?
I don't know the answer to that, frankly.
I think anything over $25,000 or $30,000 comes to the council.
Okay,
And requires a public opening.
okay.
Chris is going to have to
There was the bid, you're talking about opening of the bids?
bid opening, yes.
That took place yesterday, and I'll let John speak to that.
It was advertised in public. I was unaware that the council needed to approve it, other than by budget.
I think that, yeah, that's Chris's realm.
Actually, I think it's an executive function, and I don't think they have to approve.
It's, the funds are in the budget.
Right.
So it's a budgeted item.
Okay, but I thought there was either in, I think it's an ordinance, but I'm not sure. I don't have that.
Well,
right here.
you may be correct, and if that's the case, we'll bring that before the council.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Oh, thank you. Financial report, John.
And that would be me. If anybody doubts we cleaned up, I encourage you to drop by and see Ron Cundiff's desk. Again, I'm just summarizing our finances as they stood effective January 31st. And again, it's just a brief summary. Our cash on hand was 3.8 million. Again, as we've mentioned, we're reserving 1.8 million for our pension obligations. So the reserve stands at just around $2 million currently. Our revenues are total for the year 2.7, and that's approximately 81% of what we budgeted for revenues. The restricted road fund, both current and prior year total now $227,000. We have the same budget items to watch closely as we did last month, and that is the LDG litigation expenses, which we only have roughly 6% of our budget left through, again, June. Snow removal, we've been lucky, and the salt budget, we've been lucky in that we haven't had any new events since I last reported to you, but those are pretty tight as well. Overall, as far as our expenditures, we should be roughly at 7 months into our year, around 58% of our budget should be spent. We're at 60%. And unless you have any other questions, that's my report.
Any questions for John? Thank you, John. Commission and board reports, Forestation Board. Lee?
The Forestation Board will hold its monthly meeting tomorrow, 2:00 by WebEx. We certainly encourage any council members or residents to, you might say, view it. But our report is, the moment in progress. The biggest thing we're doing right now is trying to update the ordinance that establishes and governs the Forestation Board actions. And we've made a lot of progress on this, and we're certainly getting help from the city attorney and comments from the mayor. And we expect to really have this document ready sometime in March, so maybe it'll make the March council agenda. Other active programs we have is Spring Canopy Tree Program, where we cost share with residents, buying a good grade of tree and having it professionally planted, hopefully in their front yards will shade the street. We've had maybe 4 to 5 orders come in, and we had 4 last fall. So you can see that program over a course of a year is accounting for at least 10 nice trees in the city. We're also working on trees for the Little Hunting Creek Park. And that will include 2 memorial trees, which were funded by donors. One of those trees will actually be for Linda Wardell's parents, and the funds for those were donated by members of the Parks Committee. And the other memorial tree was donated by Fox Harbor residents for the passing of Paul Davis, who was the Fox Harbor HOA president. And finally, another program we've been talking about for a long time and may or may not actually happen, trying to work with Parks Committee and the city staff to identify a planning program which could be partially funded by LGD grant program. They do have a program where they award grants on a 50% cost sharing basis to applicants. We're trying to identify the sites, and then we have to have a 3-year maintenance program as part of that plan. But we'll be working on that, and hopefully we get it accomplished. The next filing would be in October. We have time. Any questions?
Lee, I just want to let you know you have one more order for the arbor, or the canopy tree. There's another order waiting for you.
Yes, I know, right.
Okay.
Thanks, Lee. Please extend our thanks to the other members of the Forestation Board for their important work. Other reports, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. See Linda.
She's there.
Linda, see you're on the WebEx.
But you don't see it.
I'm trying to start my video.
There
Okay.
you are.
You got you.
Well, thank you. I apologize for having to appear virtually tonight, but at least I can share with you what our committee is working on. Mostly, I'm giving you an update on things I reported, or actually, I think David Holmes gave the report last month. Ongoing events in the parks. The Little Hunting Creek Park playground is not quite open yet. We are waiting for appropriate weather conditions to place the gravel and then apply the poured rubber surface. And when that is complete, we will be able to open the playground. The Little Hunting Creek Park Pavilion, we're working hard at identifying programs that will be sponsored by the city. Council member John Evans is leading a subcommittee that is looking at potential programs and groups to create programs for the public. And John Evans has suggested that if individuals have ideas about the types of programs or specific groups that we might want to book, please pass that information along to him, and that will be considered. Also, the next children's craft program has been rescheduled. You may remember that last month we had to postpone it, and we now have a new date. It will be Saturday, March 11th in the Prospect Library from 10 o'clock until 11:30 a.m. And signups can be accomplished either online through the City of Prospect website or by calling City Hall. We do ask that that parents sign their children up for this event so we know how many children to expect. And it should be a great time. I've seen a picture of the mock-up of the craft that the children will be doing, and I think it's going to be wonderful. Other items we're continuing to work on are the Putney Pond Boardwalk project. We have received a draft report from OHM Advisors. That's our consultant for this group. We will be meeting with them next week to discuss the draft report and also sort of finalize additional information that we need and how to craft our proposal to the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund Board for their approval for the project. I think we're getting close. We will be submitting a proposal to the KHLCF board in mid-March for their consideration in April. We're still working on the Harrods Creek Bridge project. Several contractors who submitted bids for the original proposal are interested in working with us to explore ways to reduce costs for this project. You may remember that all of the bids came in much higher than we originally budgeted for this work. And I'm happy to report that several of these contractors are interested in pursuing ways to reduce the cost. And we're working with our consultant to establish a procedure to accomplish this. And finally, I would like to draw the council's attention to something that I believe was included in your council packet this month, and that is an updated listing of all of the Eagle Scout projects that have been completed in our Prospect Park. And to date, we have 41 projects that have been completed. And just in terms of material costs alone, these projects totaled nearly $40,000. And when you consider that all of the labor has been donated, the value to the city of Prospect is much greater than this amount. I think there are actually 42 projects on the list. The last one has not yet been completed. It's in the planning stages. But I think we can all be very proud and grateful for the work that the Scouts have done in our Prospect Parks. And that's my report, unless there are questions.
Any questions for Linda? Thank you, Linda.
Thank
Excellent
you.
report. We appreciate it.
First of all, I'll point out that when we got rid of all the files and everything upstairs, we didn't get rid of anything that was marked confidential. There was enough of that stuff going around in the news a few weeks ago that we were very confident we didn't want to do it. Let's see, I will point out that Jill Vidito, our administrative assistant, she was off for a month. She had a fall and sustained an injury, so she had to recover at home. So some of the stats that we have here are not accurate. They don't reflect everything that occurred. Like, for example, like citations and everything like that, this information is not accurate at all. I don't even know if you've got it because I didn't get it until today. So it's not accurate at all because there has been an increased emphasis on enforcing traffic violations, like back in the subdivisions and things like that. And I've seen a pretty steady stream of like violations, written violations that are coming in that we review on a fairly regular basis. And they've definitely had an increase in those, and they're not reflected in this report. So in the next month or so, we should see that coming in. So there are more traffic stops occurring.
With regard to reports, there's the one in here listed on January 30th. It says burglary second, and it shows two of them with two reports. That was just done as a bookkeeping thing because it's actually one offense, but there were two cars stolen at the same time. I think we talked about this the last time, or at least I know I've talked to some of you. This involved somebody that had left their garage open, and somebody goes into the garage, and actually there's an interior door open to the home. They went inside, and then there was keys to the cars hanging up inside. And they're very fortunate. They just grabbed the keys off the hook and went out and stole two cars. But for a reporting thing, the reason we took two reports, although really you should never do that, but we do that because when you put a stolen car in a report for NCIC, if they recover one and not the other, we didn't want them to clear it out, knowing that only one car's recovered. And so it clears it out. And then we were afraid that they would clear the second car out, even though, and lo and behold, what happens? A week and a half later, one of the cars is recovered. So at least we know now that the other one is still in the system. So that's exactly what we were afraid was going to happen would have occurred. So as soon as that car is recovered, then we'll merge them back. And on paper, it will just show with one burglary. And then the other with just basically two car thefts out of the same one. So it looks bad on paper right now, but it's actually the same offense in which we drew two report numbers. We will cancel one of the numbers and list it within the same offense. So we won't take the hit on both of them. The one felony report for theft by deception, that's where somebody accessed a business account for a home builder. Somehow somebody got access into their business account and took them for about $10,000. The last one is rather unique, but it's a sad story, but it happens all too frequently. They took advantage of an elderly person on a fraud. And this one was the lottery winner. You've just won, and this one was, you've just won in excess of $100 million. But to collect that, you have to pay some fees up front. And thank God the first bank issued two checks. The second bank that they went to said, hell no, we're not doing it. Thank goodness for that. Otherwise, they would have got 4 checks out of this poor guy instead of 2. But it still got him for a pretty substantial amount of money. Anyway, that is what it is. Really, there's no other reports that were any significance. I will report that Officer Mary Ann Haverland, who's been with us for 21 years, she's retiring next week. She's been around for a while, so we all wish her good luck. And that's really about it. If you've all heard some rumors about this stuff on Nextdoor, if you've got that stuff regarding Lake Forest, there was something that was posted just to allay your fears. It was reported on Nextdoor that they had 5 burglaries in which they broke into homes and stole surveillance equipment, I guess. Was it alarms, home alarms?
Alarm system.
That's not true. There was one home burglary in Lake Forest. I went back, I pulled up the crime mapping stats, and there was nothing like what appeared on Nextdoor. So take a lot of what you read on Nextdoor with a grain of salt, please.
Chief, have you identified a replacement for?
We have a part-time officer that will be elevated to full-time. Mary Ann was a full-time, and then we will replace the part-timer with another part-timer, and we're already looking at a candidate. So, are there any questions?
Chief, I know you mentioned garage doors being left open.
Yeah, I tell you what, if there's any way, we do they call it like a patrol notice, and they're, in particular, the Lake Watch officers are really good. When they drive around, if they notice a garage door is open, they will leave a notice on your door to let you know that they've discovered it open. And there's probably at least 4 or 5 a night that they still discover open, sometimes the same garage. And I will tell you that we've had one that's had 2 cars stolen out of it. And they've got 3 different notices from us on nights that they didn't have a car stolen. So,
What general
and the
area?
keys were in the car.
That's,
I mean, how do you defend that?
What general area? In the city, what general area? Sutherland?
Not really far from you. Hunting Creek.
Okay.
But I mean, the rest of them, it's all over the entire city. I'm not gonna throw rocks at one subdivision over.
Well, no, just
I mean,
curious.
they leave the doors open all the time, but that one in particular is Hunting Creek. So.
Any other questions for Chief? Thanks, Chief. We appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, we'll turn to unfinished business, the second reading of the ordinance approving revised detailed development plan and binding elements for Gustavo's Restaurant. Jason and Joshua, I think, are here to answer any questions. So this is up for second reading, and if the council chooses to adopt that ordinance.
Could you all just make a presentation on the differences between the original one and the current one and walk us through what your handout is, please?
Yeah, might need it.
I did bring extra copies, looks like Ron has printed all those out, so that's good. I'm Jason Hall with Prism Engineering, 2309 Watterson Trail, 40299. So if you flip over to Exhibit A, which is page 2 of the packet, kind of recap, that is the existing approved development plan that's approved in 2021. And with the changes, there are not a whole lot of changes in the overall layout. Basically, the scheme is the same, but if you flip to Exhibit B, just to color out our current plan. Not a whole lot of difference. We did make a few changes in parking, a few other things which are called out on Exhibit C, which is page 3. I'll just kind of go through that and you can flip back forward the other exhibits if you want to, but starting on the left side of the sheet, the detention basin along the rear of the site was expanded from what was originally shown in the previous development plan. And that was to meet stringent MSD and KYTC requirements. With the flat elevations and the soil types at this location, the basin had to grow quite a bit larger in order to discharge less. So we are discharging quite a bit less than what is there today. And then the next item, the parking area was revised to eliminate the dead end parking aisles. If you look back at Exhibit A, the original plan that was approved, all of the parking in the rear of the building is 9-degree parking with dead end aisles. And that creates, a little bit of concern with congestion during busy time. If you pull down one of those aisles and the parking's full, you have to back out. So what we did was we took, the liberty to make the change to do one-way traffic with angled parking. So you have free flow circulation around the site. You can pull in, if all the parking's full, you can leave, park up front. You don't have to do any backing on site, which is, a lot safer condition. We just changed from 9-degree parking to angled parking there. And then at the front of the building, the outdoor seating area has been expanded to the full width of the building. If you look back to Exhibit A, the original plan, the outdoor seating area came, roughly 3/4 of the way across the front of the building. So it's now been expanded to the full width of the building. Not a huge change. And then lastly, the rain gardens that were up front on the original plan, with the necessary increase in the size of the detention basin in the rear. Everything had to shift forward towards 42 a little bit. So in order to accommodate that increased basin size, to control the stormwater, the rain gardens were eliminated, and instead of having that front parking area discharge to the rain gardens and then to the right of way, we actually piped that back to the basin. So the same stormwater detention that was provided and same water quality that was provided by those rain gardens is provided by the detention basin and the water quality unit that's on the rear of the site now. So that in mind, Mr. Carter did forward questions that I know, so I can cover those. And then if you got more questions, we can ask. First question was, at what point does the Prospect Code of Ordinances, which contains the Prospect Land Development Code, enter into the process? So, and I think you might ask that question. Right. The Louisville Metro reviews each plan based on the Land Development Code that Prospect has adopted. So theoretically, it should be from the outset of their review, it should be incorporated in the review. Now, they did miss the sign note that we had on the plan that we have on most plans. It says sign shall, signage shall be in accordance with chapter 8. Well, in the code that Prospect has adopted, as you probably know, you didn't choose to adopt a sign ordinance and you have your own sign ordinance. So as part of your approval, I know there is another question related to this. There's a binding element that relates to signage. So you can choose to modify that binding element to say that all signage will be in accordance with the Prospect sign ordinance. And that will take care of that. And we can strike out that, whatever note that was, in note number 2, I believe, on it.
Or do, yeah, jumping on.
All signage, will have to conform to your ordinance because you didn't adopt the section that we're referencing on the note. So Louisville Metro should have caught that, but they didn't. So you have the right just to strike that and adjust that binding element as you see fit. And question 2 was, is there an expectation that architectural renderings for the proposed restaurant building submitted in the package to Prospect for approval are part of the parcel of that approval, if granted, notwithstanding that the materials shown are in violation of the Prospect ordinances? The current request is for the revised detailed district development plan, only the layout, positioning of the building, the parking, location of the detention basin, that sort of thing. Louisville Metro has a submit architectural renderings so they can review them as part of the package, but it is the design team's expectation that the building submittal will be a separate submittal, separate approval. And Joshua Gavin, he was architect with Encompass, which is Gustavo's architect. So any questions specific to that could be answered. But the intent is that this would be for the development plan approval only, not the building design.
That is this particular document.
Correct. That is the changes to the detention basin, the parking areas.
This is if in fact it is approved, which I think everybody here wants that to go through. This is what we're voting on.
Correct.
Just this document.
Just that document. And you can even, you can state that in approval. It is basically you're looking at the revised detailed district development plan, sheet DP 1.0. It's basically the site plan.
Minus general note 2.
Right, minus general note 2, because chapter 8 of the land development code, you did not adopt, so it reverts back to your ordinance. And of course, I'm not an attorney. I'm just an engineer, so. That's what we've seen other places.
I'm not an attorney either. I'm an engineer.
You're what?
I'm an engineer.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I think going back, I guess question 3 was, relating to that general note number 2 and the binding elements. I think we've covered that. That binding element number 5. Now, in the information I've gotten, I don't have any new binding elements. They're all the original binding elements. There aren't any proposed in your package, I don't think, are that were transmitted. They're all the original binding elements, which binding element number 5, I believe, dealt with pennants, balloons, things like that. So unless you have some different information, there aren't any new binding elements proposed. They're just the ones that were originally approved in 2021.
Yeah, John would know.
I don't believe so, but I don't have it in front of me. It's exactly what Metro transmitted.
Right, yeah. All the reason I ask is the question about the general note number 2 references proposed binding element number 5. So there's actually an existing binding element number 5 that's approved in 2021, so. But regardless, chapter 8 doesn't apply, you have your own ordinance, so that should take care of that. And fourth question is, why is there no reference to or recognition of the sovereignty of home rule cities and their ordinance in the binding elements? Louisville Metro only makes a recommendation for a particular action and defers the final action to you all. So I think, you know, that recognition is kind of inherent to the process. Because they make the recommendation, you can take it, make your own decision, make your own action. So I think, at least my interpretation of that is that they just make a recommendation based on the ordinance that, or the development code that you've adopted, and you still have the right to take it from there and make your own decision and make your own action. So those were the questions that have been presented, so I'll gladly answer any more. And like I said, Joshua's here representing Encompass and Stable as well. We're just the civil engineer, so.
Jason, I am burdened by a law degree, although my practice was a long time. So I'm not used to reading these things. Where the retention base or the rain, whatever, water up front used to go in this green area, what will go there? Under
There is currently there's since US 42 is considered a designated parkway in Jefferson County, there is a required 30-foot parkway buffer, and then we have followed the land development code for 3-foot screening with shrubs and trees there, which are required by the ordinance.
Right. Okay.
Other questions for Jason or for Joshua?
A good question. Legal. He posed a legal question. Are you in concert with that?
Okay, in regards to, would you repeat the legal question? I'm having trouble following you.
Are we talking about the sign portion?
No, the connection between Metro and us, and we have the authority to do thus and such.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I think he answered that we have the authority to do what we want to. They just make a recommendation.
Right. If you look at the, which they didn't provide me with a copy of the actual transmittal, but I do have a copy of the staff report. It's a recommendation from Louisville Metro to the city of Prospect. And just like any other city within Jefferson County, you have the right to make your own decision on final action on the request.
Exactly.
So what are you suggesting that we need to do to your submission to conform with our signage? You kept on referring to chapter 8. That's Metro, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what about our signage? What did you suggest that we do to conform with that?
Since one thing, Louisville Metro used to, years past, they would have us put all the sign information on the plan. So they don't have us do that anymore. So they have us list this note, refers to chapter 8. Now that works everywhere that has adopted chapter 8. So since you haven't, all you would need to do is, in your approval, just state that you want to, that you're, revising binding element number 5 or adding a new binding element or a condition of approval that states that all signage shall be within accordance with the Prospect sign ordinance. And that general note 2 on the revised detailed district development plans does not apply. Which I think that would be that'd be automatic, because chapter 8, you've not adopted chapter 8, so chapter 8 would not apply.
Excuse me, but what, paragraph 5, okay, of this binding elements, proposed binding elements that came with this package?
But I look at that, because I did not look at it. So those are the original binding elements from 2020. So those were approved with the original rezoning. So those are existing binding elements now. So I'm not sure if that's just one page out of many that they
I
transmitted.
don't either. This is all that I got.
So those were, which they're the same. We're just, as part of the revised plan, we're just asking for those, well, those would still apply. We're not asking for any changes to those. This was basically a staff level change at Metro, which is just basically a development plan change. They don't have the authority to change binding elements and that sort of thing without going back to the planning commission. So,
But this particular binding element is in part in conflict with our ordinance, sign ordinance.
so you could, and that's number 5.
Yeah.
So you could simply either strike number 5 out, add your own. It says, at this point, you make the approval. Sure. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Joshua Gedney. I'm a registered architect. I work for Encompass. We're at 113 East Main Street.
Could you speak up just a little bit, please, into the
Move the
mic?
microphone a little closer.
Yes, sir.
Move it forward for yourself.
My name is Joshua Gedney. I'm an architect with Encompass at 113 East Main in LaGrange. So the binding elements were adopted by the previous council in 2021. And what Jason has pointed out is that there was an error officially in that binding element. Now, revised district development plans and the following permit process act kind of like a belt and suspenders. So even though this references the Metro sign ordinance in number 5, in reality, as it comes through the prospect process, you'll have a sign review, you'll have a permit review for architectural elements. So my gut is that would have been caught at that time, but to make this correct, it would be appropriate for you to say we're amending the original binding element number 5 to read that it must comply with the City of Prospects signage ordinance. And it should have been caught at that time, but it wasn't. It was during COVID. Everything was remote. You can understand it.
But also on the amended plan that you have, strike paragraph 2, right? Under the general note.
General note 2, yes, sir.
So we need to do both of those.
Yes, sir.
Strike
That would be
2
appropriate.
and then amend that.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to approve the proposed ordinance?
So, I move that we approve it subject to the changes that were just identified.
Okay.
I second that.
Right. Is there this, and I think we're clear. We'll be able to clear up exactly what the changes are that you all have identified. I think we're all in agreement on. With those, with that motion having been made and with the understanding regarding the changes to the language, is there further discussion?
A question. What I think I heard, Joshua, is that we'll have an opportunity to decide on the architectural plan later on. We're coming back.
Yes, sir. One of Jason's comments was regarding Metro's acknowledgement of your sovereignty as a local city. And one of those elements is that in Metro, often a binding element would be made to the renderings that would incorporate those. And they specifically did not do that, so that the renderings that were attached are information items, but they're not binding elements. So architectural review will occur in the regular submittals for building permits. And of course, that would come through your all's code enforcement and plan review department. So
Okay, so we'll have an opportunity to decide on the architectural plan.
yes, sir. That's not part of the binding elements or the revised.
We're not real excited about what we've seen in the renderings.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, the
Yes, sir.
building materials, we'll still be able to make sure that you comply with our ordinances regarding.
Yes, sir. That would be part of the architectural review comments that would go through your all's department.
How far down the road do you think that will happen?
We're waiting on one piece from our mechanical electrical engineers. We're hoping to have everything in just a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there further discussion or further questions? If not, are we ready to vote?
Are we doing the amendment?
The amendment, I think we understand the amendments are what's been discussed and that they'll be incorporated into the motion.
Okay.
2 provisions. We're moving this to strike number 2 under general notes and incorporating the change that Frank has got down in the general.
Revised binding element number 5.
Number 5.
Yeah.
Number
Yeah.
five.
That's your
Number
amendment?
5.
Okay.
to comply with the Prospect time.
Yep.
Okay, so the vote is on the motion with those amendments included. Frank?
Yes.
That's Don Grader.
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Mayor? Yes. Don?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate your presentation and all the help you provided ahead of time.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks. The next item on the agenda is an order concerning the nominations by the mayor of citizens of the city to serve on the City of Prospect Forestation Board and affixing terms of office thereto. So this has been in your materials, and this is basically reappointing all the current members of the Forestation Board and giving them staggered terms so that we'll get back on track in having the terms be consistent with the ordinance.
Move for approval.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that order is adopted. Next item on the agenda is a resolution, and this has to do with better let you talk about this one now. I can talk about that.
This is a resolution for the council authorizing the mayor to execute any documents needed to report to the U.S. Treasury that the entire sum of the American Rescue Plan funds will be allocated towards general government expenses. And in this case, we've talked about applying those funds towards salaries.
Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Is there a discussion?
What if, what in the event that this is not accepted, salaries aren't accepted? And that was a question.
They are some. It's a general government expense. This is on the recommendation from Kim.
Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is approved. The next item on the agenda is a resolution opposing the passage of Senate Bill 50 and House Bill 50 relating to partisan local elections. And this is a proposal in the legislature that would require city elections to be partisan and not to have nonpartisan. And this is a resolution recommended by the League of Cities, Kentucky League of Cities, and it opposes this change in the statute. I'll mention that there was an important piece of information that came with this proposed resolution, and it is that out of the 400 plus cities in the Commonwealth, all but 6 have nonpartisan elections. So apparently, the overwhelming majority of cities prefer nonpartisan elections because they're the ones who make that determination. So this is simply saying, as I understand it, leave it up to the cities. It's not the legislatures. We're asking the legislature not to take on telling us how to hold our elections and have partisan or nonpartisan races. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? We'll do a voice vote again. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That resolution is approved. The next ordinance before us for a first reading is an ordinance relating to the nuisances of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Prospect. And this is what Ms. McGrail spoke to earlier and John Clark spoke to earlier. So is there and the practice in Prospect has been custom, and Sandra spoke as well. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. The practice has been that for a first reading in the City of Prospect, although we're not required to, we have voted on that. So I'll ask if there's a motion, and that's something that council may wish to consider in the future, moving to a different system for first readings other than voting on it. But since that is our established custom, I suggest we move forward in that way this evening. Is there a motion to give the ordinance a first reading?
Excuse me, Doug. The agenda doesn't call for a first reading. So I think the assumption's been that this is on the docket for discussion only. Can we have a first reading without notifying the public that a first reading is coming?
Well, the item on the agenda is an ordinance. And I think that it'd be clear to any reasonable person that we're talking about a first reading of that ordinance. So I don't see that as a problem. That's my ruling on that issue. So is there a motion to give the ordinance a first reading?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Is there discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Based on the viewpoints that have been made by various members of the Code Enforcement Board, I'm prepared to vote for this with the caveat that I think that it needs some significant changes, mostly in accordance with the viewpoints presented this evening by Sandra Leonard. And I hope that there will be an alternative to this, improving it. It's subject to that. I'll vote to go ahead.
Is there further discussion?
Yes, I'm fine. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
First of all, to my knowledge, there's no one who really objects to managed garden plots, of any ilk. But we're here to discuss this proposed ordinance change. And I'd like to know who's the sponsor of this ordinance? Because I want to direct the questions to that person.
Well, I asked the Code Enforcement Board to make a recommendation, and this was their recommendation. That's what John Clark spoke to earlier.
Okay, well, then the questions are, why are we in uniformity with Metro? We're spending $600,000 fighting Metro. They are significantly different in scope in all of the areas that ordinances apply to. I mean, we have no airports, high rises, hotels. The list goes on, and we're including this verbatim, which I don't think is a good idea. These changes are they truly the CEB recommendations? I mean, the wording, not the concept that these are good, but the specific wording in these things.
And I can't answer that. This was the recommendation that they provided, that we essentially adopt the Metro ordinance.
I'd like to know what the rationale for deletion of the current items 1, 2, and 3 are.
And I don't know the answer to that.
And because if you include the paragraph comes directly from Metro, it becomes all encompassing. And I think it's one of those issues where be careful what you look for, what you wish for, because we specifically go and state the property within the city which faces or abuts any city street. What is suggested is all premises. All premises, for goodness sakes, all premises. I mean, really, and that's a significant change. So, you go on and on with the wording, but I know that the original, this 1, 2, and 3, a lot of thought went into these. We used not just Metro's existing ordinance, but other small cities, not only from Kentucky, but from all over the country relative to nuisance ordinances. But it wasn't specifically addressing, gardens and that type of stuff. So anyway, I think there's an awful lot of work to be done with the wording of this thing. Yeah. And I think that a first reading tonight would be premature until there's significant review of the wording.
I think that's a fair point.
And I would point out that, I think that everybody is saying there needs to be substantial changes. And if there are going to be substantial changes, you have to have another first reading anyway.
Yes,
So
I agree.
I think your points are well taken.
And what I'm hearing is there's a general agreement that we need to do something.
Absolutely.
So I think my view would be to give this a first reading. If there's substantial changes, we'll need to have which it appears that there almost certainly will be, we'll need to have a new first reading. So I just think to keep the issue moving forward, a first reading would be, we've got the motion, we've got the second, we're having a discussion, and I would hope we would have the first reading this evening.
Well, until, until a group gets together that can agree on the wording, regardless, what sides or whatever put together, they can come up with the wording. I don't think a first reading is appropriate. Again, as I stated earlier, I thought this was just for a discussion because it was premature for a first reading, but.
Okay, well, we've got a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Yes.
Don? Oh,
It seems we're all assuming there are going to be significant changes at the least. Assuming that's correct, which certainly seems to me that it is. What is it? I'm sure you have a reason for what you'd like to see, but what do we gain by having the first reading if we are likely going to have to come back and do it anyway?
I think it keeps the process moving forward.
The process can move forward by somebody else putting something on the docket after we've come up with whatever else we want to propose, though. I'm with Frank that this needs, especially given the comments that Sandra made, which I thought were very valid, that having this as part of the nuisance thing may not be what we really intend on doing to it. I'm also with Frank that I'm in favor of natural landscaping, but I'm not in favor of it in front yards. 99.9 of the yards in Prospect are grass turf yards. And any real estate person will tell you that curb appeal is very important in the valuation of your property. And to have a yard, front yard, entirely almost in natural landscaping, I think devalues the neighborhood and the adjoining property. And I think it hurts our property values. And I think that's something we need to consider when we're revising this. I'm all in favor of the natural landscaping in the side yards and in the backyards, but I'm opposed to it in the front yards.
Okay. So I think what we're coming to is the formation of a working group to work on revisions to this proposal. So with direction for that working group to report back to us so that we can give notice before the next regular meeting, whatever suggestions they choose to make. So if you've got an interest in serving on that working group, if you'll let me know after the meeting, I'll appoint a group and we'll march forward. Now there is a motion and a second on the floor. So
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, let me just finish this. So there's a motion and a second on the floor. If Don and Sarah are in agreement, we'll withdraw those and move forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Don.
I was saying, just to keep straight in our own minds, there are two things we're looking at here. One is substantively, where do we want to wind up? Is with our own personal view of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and all that sort of thing. And the other is, what is the specific language that will get us there? They're obviously intertwined, but they're not exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think it may be helpful for the working group to talk with some of the folks who put together the Metro ordinance.
Yeah.
And see what their rationale was and what their point of view on that, on those
I
kind
mean,
of.
I just have to, I don't know enough yet to know, how I would come down if this were presented to us to vote up or down. Because I don't know what some of these terms mean. I mean, I understand there are at least one or two that are defined terms, but the others, I don't know what they mean. And I'm not sure I agree with John Clark's statement that this adds clarity. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't clear to me.
So if I'll suggest anybody that would like to serve on that group, just let me know. We'll put the group together with a view toward getting a report back. I would say a week before our next, at least a week before our next meeting.
Doug, we also need to include the individuals that, obviously put this forth initially to understand
Correct.
what's in their
Correct.
thoughts as well, what sense when that wasn't.
Correct.
Is that enough time?
I don't know.
Well, we'll get together and
Clerk and the board.
see what we need to do.
And if I can add, I think there are problems with the metro ordinance as well. It says you have to cut it down once a year, but it doesn't say to how many inches. I mean, cut it down, does that mean you cut it to the nub, or does it mean you can still leave it 5 inches or 4 inches? It doesn't say.
Well, there's other things, the metro ordinance deals with very large tracks and the 10 inches and, the things that require discussion that fits us.
Yeah.
That's basically it. That's right.
It's a helpful discussion. I think this has been very helpful. So if we're finished with that item on the agenda, I think we've come to the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned. And again, let me know if you want to be on that work. Okay.